The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, film historian Michael F. Blake looks at the important role that the Southwest landscape played in shaping our vision of the Old West. His book is The Cavalry Trilogy: John Ford, John Wayne, and the Making of Three Classic Westerns. Meet Matthew Landon, a librarian with the Pima County Public Library, who recently received national recognition for his efforts to bolster youth mental health and combat social stigma in our community. And our storytelling series continues with Elena Acoba, who considers the intersection of the flag, military service, racism, and her father's legacy. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. As a lover of film, I was thrilled to make contact years ago with film historian Michael F. Blake. His dad was a celebrated makeup man and actor who worked under the legendary Jack Pierce at Universal Studios. So Blake grew up well acquainted with the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd. Following his own career as a makeup artist and actor, Michael F. Blake retired to Arizona and dedicated himself to film and historical scholarship. He's written acclaimed books about both the silent film star Lon Chaney and American President Teddy Roosevelt. His latest book lets him revisit the larger-than-life collaborations between two silver screen legends. It's called The Cavalry Trilogy: John Ford, John Wayne, and the Making of Three Classic Westerns.
Well, John Ford's my favorite director. I consider him the greatest director of American cinema. 4 Oscars for Best Directing, which nobody else has topped. I've always loved Ford's films. I love the Cavalry Trilogy, and I always felt there was more to tell about it than what you see in most books. Unfortunately, writers who are doing biographies on Ford or John Wayne, they only have so much room. And, word count is your worst enemy, so you got to cut to the bone. So I just thought, it's time the Cavalry Trilogy got its due.
To define for our listeners, the Cavalry Trilogy encompasses what films and what years?
It starts off with Fort Apache in 1948. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, 1949, Ford's first film he shot in Monument Valley in Technicolor, and ends with Rio Grande in 1950.
So in a very short span of time by today's standards, he was able to crank out 3 classic Westerns.
And in very short amount of time shooting, he brought Fort Apache in under schedule by 15 days. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon was done under 33 days, and same with Rio Grande, which, when you compare it to what it takes now to get a movie done, it's a miracle.
Yeah, it's easily a tenth of the time, even for a smaller budget type picture.
Right.
So I recently watched The Grapes of Wrath for the first time. I read the book in school, but had never seen the film. And immediately I felt a comfortable hand on my shoulder. And I attribute that to John Ford, that his direction is so solid that you're in the hands of a good storyteller. Where did that confidence come from? How is it that John Ford was able to achieve the level of success he did as a director? What do you think his major influences were?
Silent movies. In the silent movie era, when he started, you had to tell a story pictorially. You could rely on a few title cards here and there, but you had to tell the story with the actors and let their emotion show through their face and their body. John Wayne always said that Ford had an ability to take a script and throw out all this dialogue and keep the actual meat of the story, and it meant more. And there's so much, like you say, in Grapes of Wrath, that wonderful scene when Grandpa dies and he's holding the ground in his hand as he dies. You didn't need any dialogue to get that across. He knew what mattered. He knew how to tell a story, and he cut the film in the camera in the sense that if we were doing a scene together, he might use a 2-shot of the two of us and say, okay, that's it, let's go on next. A great example of that is James Stewart and Richard Widmark alongside the river and Two Rode Together. He did it in a 2-shot. The whole scene between the two of them never went into coverage. Ford, when he finished the film, the editor could pretty much put it together, and it didn't allow the producer to put his hand in there and say, well, I think we ought to do this, like they do now.
So we've established that John Ford was not a typical director of his era. He was one of the greats. John Wayne, not a typical actor of his era.
No.
Also one of the greats. How would you describe the two men and their working relationship?
It was a Damien Pythias. It was Wayne always called Ford Coach or Pappy. And Ford was born in 1894. Wayne was born in 1907. It was very much a father and son relationship in a way, because Wayne's relationship with his dad was okay, but it wasn't great. And he saw his father fail in business after business after business, where Ford didn't. It could be contentious at times. I'll tell you this. I was at Ford's funeral. And as they're wheeling his casket out with the battered U.S. flag that he had taken from the Battle of Midway, and he's coming out and the organist is playing Battle Hymn of the Republic, and my Irish sentiment, Irish will cry at a traffic light changing. I was trying to hold back the tears, and then I saw John Wayne walking down the aisle. His face was all red, covered with grief. He was sobbing. I lost it, completely lost it. And you could tell, you wanted to go up to John Wayne and give him a hug, because you could tell that their friendship, it was very rare in Hollywood. And to this day, it's very rare in Hollywood. Wayne was extremely loyal, not just to Ford, but the Ford Stock Company people and crew members, and even the Navajos that worked in the films. Wayne brought in John Stanley and Many Mules and Jack Stanley, the brother of John. John's the one in McClintock who says, "Great party, where's the whiskey?" Well, he brought him in. Wayne was tremendously loyal, as was Ford. There was a lot there between the two of them.
It's easy to look back in retrospective and say the Cavalry trilogy, but was there anything like that on the minds of either Ford or Wayne, that they were making 3 films that were going to be thematically linked? Was there any inkling that this was going to be regarded one day as a trilogy?
No. Ford had even said in interviews that he didn't plan on making a trilogy. It was basically he needed to make money. The Fugitive, which was the first of a 5-picture deal at RKO, was a complete bomb. Made, I think, $800,000 total. And it left the company in about $500,000 debt at that point. Now we're talking $1947.
Why do you think was a key reason why it failed?
It was too symbolic. It was beautifully shot by the Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa. It would have done well in an art house, but the general public, they didn't really respond to it. And Henry Fonda, as the Mexican priest, he mainly hired Fonda because he needed a name to get it done. It's a great little film. I enjoy it, but I wouldn't call it one of Ford's best. And because of that, he had to turn to the Cavalry. And James Warner Bella had written several short stories for Saturday Evening Post and Collier's. And he wrote one called Massacre. And Ford bought the rights, and he turned that into Ford Apache. Ford always said using a short story to make a movie versus a novel like Grapes of Wrath was so much easier, because it gives you just a basis to build the story on and then enhance it from there. Whereas if you're doing a novel, what do I cut? What do I keep? So all 3 Cavalry trilogy were based on James Warner Bella stories. And he did Ford Apache first. He wanted to shoot it in color, but it was too costly. So they went out to Monument Valley once again and had Henry Fonda, John Wayne, Shirley Temple, Victor McLaughlin, Pedro Armendariz, a great performance by Mexican actor Miguel Iclan playing Cochise. He never says one word in English. It's all in Spanish. And there's this one great scene when he realizes that they're going to have to fight the cavalry, and he picks up this dust and he stands there and he throws it down on the ground, and you see his shoulders slump, and he walks away because like he's going like, oh, God, we got to do this. Why do they have to be so stupid? Beautiful moment. Beautiful moment.
So let's talk about the role that the Arizona Territory plays in these films. People like to say that the location becomes a character in the film, etc. What's your opinion?
In any John Ford, Monument Valley is as much important character as the actors are. John Milius, the director, said he felt that John Ford was having a love affair with Monument Valley. And he was. He loved Monument Valley. And the way he would photograph it, it's every image is a painting. There's a great shot in She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. My God, it's a Charlie Russell painting come to life. And he studied both Remington's Calvary paintings and Russell's paintings. Russell never did any Calvary, but you can see in Yellow Ribbon, he takes the color palette that Russell used so wonderfully in his paintings, and it's in the film. And the Calvary characters are right out of a Remington. Look at the way the hats are styled and the way they're dressed and things like that. I mean, no other director has shown off Monument Valley as great as Ford has in all his films. And a lot of directors were hesitant while Ford was alive to go to Monument Valley and film there because they were afraid of being called a copycat.
So, Michael, I can tell that you came to this project with a lot of enthusiasm and nostalgia and love for these films. Now that you have written the book, has any of that changed for you? Do you have any difference between how you feel about these films now as when you started researching?
No, I have greater love for them. Like I had said, that how Ford shot these films in 45, 30 some odd days, it's unheard of. He always said there are no problems, only opportunities. And God knows he took great opportunities. And if I didn't have enough respect for Ford, I really do now. He was just a marvelous filmmaker. And you watch how audiences respond to these films today. All the jokes and everything hit the spot. They hit the right moment. They laugh. They like this. They like that. Ford knew what he was doing.
I spoke with Michael F. Blake. His latest book about movie history is the Calvary Trilogy, John Ford, John Wayne, and the Making of Three Classic Westerns. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, it can be a decade or more between the time a person develops symptoms of a mental health problem and when they get professional care. Experts say that youth who are struggling are far more likely to turn to their peers or to books when seeking the hope and the help they need. Next, Alicia Vasquez meets Matthew Landon, a librarian in the Community Outreach Office of the Pima County Public Library. Landon has been involved in several projects designed to reach out to youth in need in our community, and last month he was recognized with a national award for his work.
Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thank you.
Now, if you don't mind first just starting and telling us about the Movers and Shakers Award that you were given.
Yes, the Library Journal is a national trade publication, and I was named a Mover and Shaker for the May issue. And the Mover and Shaker Award was primarily for my work with the Youth Health Action Team at the Pima County Public Library.
Now, if you don't mind telling me just about the work that you do with the Youth Health Action Team.
Back in 2022, with my colleague Heather Severson and with a grant from the Arizona State Library, with funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, we paid presenters, hired youth interns, provided digital literacy training, and secured supplies for the creation of an array of writing, art, and media art projects. We recruited 15 interns for the 2022-23 school year, and they completed 19 projects, including bookmarks designed with pro-mental health messages and a weekly youth health zine program called Lifeline. They also participated at the Tucson Festival of Books by interviewing local children's book author and illustrator Adam Rex. And they held a monthly Tech Time, which is an intergenerational help session for adults struggling with tech issues. And one of the final things we did for the year in the summer of 23 was a digital storytelling boot camp where young people created mixed media stories about personal experiences of community.
Now, when you bring up mental health, we've heard the concept of stigma busting. What does that mean to you, and how do you feel empowered in your line of work to take steps to bust stigmas?
Yes, part of addressing mental health is addressing the stigma that surrounds mental health issues. Stigma is a mark of shame that often accompanies a mental health diagnosis. People get this idea from society and from themselves that mental illness is a failing on their part or that they have something to be embarrassed or ashamed about. It doesn't make sense when you think about it. People don't feel this way when they get a cancer or a heart disease diagnosis. Stigma and self-stigma prevent real communication, understanding, and empathy with those involved. The Health Action Team youth were frank about the issues they faced, and Frank Talk combats stigma by putting issues out in the open so that any reader faced with similar challenges knows that they are not alone.
What led you to be so passionate about the idea of opening dialogue about mental health?
Really, this all started with the 2021 Surgeon General's Advisory on the Crisis of Youth Mental Health. The pandemic was happening, and even before the pandemic, an alarming number of young people struggled with feelings of helplessness, depression, and thoughts of suicide. And we wanted to tackle this issue on a broad level at the library. And I have personal experience with mental illness myself as a young person, and that led me to be passionate about this issue and to really push forward to make something happen and make it a success.
How would you say that's helped you to better connect with kids facing the same struggles?
What we've learned about youth is that they reach out to each other with their mental health struggles. They don't consult adults, and they don't really reach out to professionals. They look to each other for support. And as an adult who cares, I was available to them to talk to, and I have empathy for them. The Pima County Health Department developed a Not Alone campaign, which is a website that is for peers to learn about how to support each other's mental health. So they can go on the website and take courses on how to support their peers. And the reason that the health department designed the program the way they did was because they knew that teens were looking to each other for support, and they wanted to get in where the action was happening.
How can just the whole concept of literature be a powerful tool to help kids struggling with mental illness and to help them find the strength to open up dialogue about their own personal struggles?
The library prides itself in offering a diverse array of materials for our customers. So we try to provide books that all of our customers are interested in, even controversial books. But books about mental health and books with protagonists who struggle with mental health are popular in the library and allow readers to get that empathy and to see themselves in another person's shoes. Books can transport you to a new world, and in that world you can be a hero. You can struggle and survive your mental health challenges.
A great point to bring up. And also, personally, were there any books that inspired you, books that helped you in your own journey?
That's a great question. I was drawn to fantasy books as a child, and my favorite author as a young person was Ray Bradbury and his Martian Chronicles and his other collections of short stories. Ray Bradbury had a great way of bringing you into the story, and he had a positive message about community and people that really shone through in his work.
When you learned you were being presented with this recognition from the Library Journal, what did that mean to you?
Receiving the recognition from the Library Journal was an affirmation of the importance of the work that we were doing at the library. My colleague Heather Severson and I worked hard on the Health Action Team, and Heather was instrumental in nominating me for various awards. So I'm very grateful to her for taking the time to go through with the nomination process.
Alicia Vasquez talked with Matthew Landon of the Pima County Public Library. He's the co-founder of the Youth Health Action Team. We have a link to get in touch with them on the Arizona Spotlight page at azpm.org. There is something very powerful about a single voice sharing a true story. It lets the storyteller reveal their inner thoughts and share their experience, and possibly forge new connections with anyone who takes time to listen. In support of this important community tradition, Arizona Spotlight features a different storyteller on the third Thursday of every month. Here's Tony Paniagua with an introduction.
This month's storyteller is Tucson resident Elena Acoba. In addition to working at the Arizona Daily Star and Visit Tucson, Elena Acoba also spent more than 2 decades as an independent writer and editor on behalf of various institutions in southern Arizona. A few years ago, she started the new adventure of oral storytelling, and she's been hooked ever since. This story is especially timely given that Memorial Day was last month. Flag Day is on June 14th each year, and the 4th of July will be here soon. Here is Elena Acoba talking about her father, the late Apolinario Acoba.
We buried my dad on a crisp, clear winter morning at the coastal Los Angeles area cemetery where my mom already rests. Following the chapel service and short drive to the plot, I walked to the white wooden seats reserved for family at the graveside service. That's when I noticed the middle-aged man in a smartly fitted black suit, a white shirt, and thin black tie. He stood by himself with erect dignity as if at attention. My first thought was that he was on the mortuary staff. My second, that he was ex-military. After my sisters and I settled in our seats, I saw him walk crisply in my direction, holding a small, brown packing box. He knelt on one knee before me and presented the box. He said a flag was inside. I can no longer remember his exact words that followed, but he spoke softly about how every veteran deserves to be honored, even if he wished not to be. I thanked him, feeling both a little touched and a little annoyed. My dad, you see, hated his 2-year military service as a Korean War soldier. Dad was born of immigrant parents in the territory of Hawaii and grew up in the Philippines, to which the family returned when he was 3. At 18 years old, he reclaimed his U.S. citizenship, following his dad's orders to dutifully register for the draft and to vote. Dad got acquainted with his new country, living first in Hawaii and then California. 5 years after he repatriated, the government came calling. Following basic training, my dad drew stateside service. But he sought something more adventurous, so he put in for a transfer. His reassignment was disastrous. He eventually went to the Korean front lines, fighting Chinese in close combat. On top of that, he endured racist remarks for the first time in his life from fellow soldiers attached to a National Guard unit from a southern state. Returning to America after his tour of duty made him feel worse. He felt shunned by his fellow Americans, who held no parades, no welcome home signs, no expressions of appreciation for the warriors in a conflict that was a draw at best. On the day he was discharged, my dad bitterly threw away nearly everything that reminded him of his tour of duty. What we have left now are a few pictures and government paperwork. What he couldn't discard for a few years were the battles he continued to fight in his nightmares. He would awake drenched in sweat, body shaking, heart pounding. He easily became irritated and angry. He no longer sought adventure and instead clung to the familiar for dear life. They didn't call it post-traumatic stress disorder back then, but I'm sure he had some of that. Fast forward through a life. My dad married, raised a family, had a long career in aerospace, and lived many years. I knew at a young age that he detested his service. And of course, I lived through his fits of anger, his constant complaints about the unfairness of life, and his never-ending cynicism. But I didn't know the depths of the hauntings until he was in his 70s, retired, widowed, and ready to talk about his experiences as a young man. Those stories put into context the person I knew my whole life. Knowing how he felt about his service, my sisters and I declined the mortuary's offer to provide military funeral honors at his gravesite. While I accepted the flag from the soldier on that day, I felt a little betrayed that our wishes for my dad weren't followed. It took me several years to finally embrace that soldier's compassionate gesture on that day. I now understand that while some warriors made the ultimate sacrifice for our country, all of them, like my dad, lost something of their lives. That is worth recognizing and honoring. 12 years on, the flag is still in the box. Maybe it's time to take it out.
Elena Acoba is one of 4 daughters, and one of her sisters keeps the flag in California, where she lives. She's thinking about flying the flag on the 4th of July and on their father's birthday, the 14th of August. And even though Elena says her father Apollonario Acoba's military service was very difficult, he did fulfill his father's orders to register for the draft and to vote. Elena says Apollonario always informed himself about the candidates and issues and faithfully cast his ballots. He was not an activist, but felt strongly that voting is more beneficial than fighting wars. We'll have a news story from another member of our community on Thursday, July 18th. For Arizona Spotlight, I'm Tony Paniagua.
Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Alicia Vasquez. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.